Welcome back to the channel. These stories are meant for late nights, quiet rooms, and headphones on. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from tonight. Now, let's begin the first story. There are some moments in life that replay in your head no matter how hard you try to bury them, not because you want to relive them, but because your mind keeps circling the same question. What if I had done something differently? I've lived with hearing loss since childhood. I can speak normally, read lips fairly well, and get by in everyday life. But there are things I miss: subtle sounds, soft footsteps, whispered words. The kind of details that most people take for granted. I've learned to adopt, and most days I don't even think about it. But that winter taught me that silence can hide more than just sound. My name is Elise Marine. I live in a quiet suburban town called Pinebridge, tucked along the edge of a vast forest in eastern Ontario. It's the kind of place where neighbors wave at each other while shoveling snow, where kids leave bikes on lawns without worrying they'll disappear, where nothing truly bad is supposed to happen. That's why I liked it. I live alone in a small two-story house at the end of a crescent road. My only constant companion is my dog, Jasper. He's a muscular German Shepherd mix with a thick coat and a bark that sounds like it belongs to something much larger. I adopted him from a rescue shelter 3 years ago, and since then he's been my running partner, my hiking buddy, and my comfort on lonely nights. In winter, Jasper becomes unstoppable. Snow seems to switch on some ancient instinct in him. He loves tearing through fresh drifts, leaping over fallen logs, sprinting in circles like a wild animal rediscovering freedom. And every afternoon after work, we walk the trails in the forest behind my neighborhood. I knew those trails well. There were 3 main paths: the wide, family-friendly loop, the longer ridge trail, and the narrow, rarely used cut-through path that led to a clearing overlooking a frozen creek. I usually stuck to the familiar ones, but one afternoon in early February, curiosity got the better of me. The holiday season had just ended. I'd finally settled back into routine. The world felt calm again. That day, the sky was a dull winter gray, and fresh snow coated the ground like untouched paper. I finished a late lunch, grabbed Jasper's leash, and headed out, planning a short walk before darkness set in. By the time we reached the forest entrance, Jasper was already whining with excitement. I unclipped his leash once we were past the first marker sign. He shot forward, disappearing between the trees. The forest was quiet. Not dead quiet, but the kind of winter hush where sound feels muffled by snow. Tall pines stood like pillars, their branches heavy with white. My boots crunched with each step. Jasper darted ahead, then circled back, his breath forming cloudy bursts in the cold air. About 30 minutes in, I reached the familiar fork in the trail. One path had clear footprints, dog prints, boot prints, even sled tracks. The other path was untouched, smooth, perfect. A blank trail leading deeper into the woods. Feeling adventurous, I chose the untouched path. It wound between thicker trees, narrowing as it went. Jasper stayed ahead, but I noticed he wasn't running as wildly anymore. His ears were forward, his tail stiff. He was paying attention to something. I told myself he was just picking up wildlife scents. Eventually, the trail opened into a small clearing. A thin, frozen creek ran across one side, barely visible beneath ice and snow. I smiled, remembering why I liked this spot. I had brought binoculars with me, a gift from my sister. I wanted to watch birds once the weather warmed. Out of habit, I lifted them now, scanning the tree line. That's when I saw it. Something unnatural. A shape. I adjusted focus. Near the far edge of the clearing, half hidden behind a fallen log, stood a crude shelter. A blue tarp stretched over branches. Dark shadows beneath. No smoke, no movement. Just a makeshift structure in the middle of the forest. A campsite. Or something else. A chill slid down my spine. People weren't supposed to camp this close to town, especially not in winter, especially not without official park markings. Curiosity tugged at me, but the light was fading faster than I expected. The sky had shifted to a dull blue-gray. I didn't want to risk staying too long. I whistled for Jasper and turned back toward the trail. That's when I noticed his behavior change completely. He wasn't running anymore. He stayed close to my side, sniffing the ground intensely. Every few steps he paused, nostrils flaring, hackles slightly raised. I followed his gaze to the snow. There were footprints. Large ones. Larger than mine. Longer stride, heavier impression. I stopped walking and stared. Then, almost absurdly, I placed my boot beside one print. My foot looked small next to it. A man's boots. Someone had walked this path recently, after the snowfall, meaning they were here today, recently enough that the prints hadn't softened. I turned slowly, looking down the trail behind me. Empty. No movement, no figures, just trees and fading light. Whoever left those prints had been ahead of me on this same path, yet I hadn't seen or heard anyone pass me, and I was alone when I entered the trail. I told myself a simple explanation. Maybe they were in the clearing before I arrived and left while I was looking through the binoculars. That made sense. I forced myself to accept it. Jasper didn't seem convinced. As we headed back, the forest grew darker. The branches above blocked what little light remained. Jasper stayed close, occasionally glancing behind us. About halfway back to the main trail, Jasper stopped. Not a playful pause, a sudden, rigid stop. Then he barked, loud, sharp, repeated. I turned around. At first, I saw nothing. Then, between two trees, a figure stood. A man. He was tall, much taller than me, broad-shouldered, dressed in charcoal-colored snow pants and a white winter jacket patterned in pale camouflage. His hood was up. His hands were buried deep in his pockets. He stood only a few feet away, close enough that I should have heard him approach, close enough that my heart instantly began pounding. He didn't move toward me. He just stood there, watching. His face was partially shadowed. I couldn't make out details, only the pale oval of skin and the dark hollows of eyes. His mouth moved. He was saying something. I tried to read his lips, but the dim light made it almost impossible, and I didn't know if he was speaking English or French. I froze. My mind scrambled for explanations. A lost hiker, a neighbor out late, a coincidence. But why so close? Why silent? Why not announce himself from a distance? Jasper barked again, stepping forward slightly, body tense. The man kept speaking, his lips moving slowly, calmly. Finally, I took a slow step backward. Then another. Jasper stayed between us, barking steadily. The man remained motionless, his gaze fixed. I didn't wait for him to move. I turned and walked away, forcing myself not to run. Every instinct screamed at me to sprint, but I didn't want to trigger pursuit. I kept my pace controlled, steady, heart hammering. Only when the trees began thinning near the neighborhood did I finally breathe again. By the time I reached my street, darkness had settled completely. Porch lights glowed warmly. Houses looked safe and familiar. Normal. I told myself I was overreacting. I got inside, locked the door, fed Jasper, and went through my usual evening routine. A shower, a cup of tea, a little television. I convinced myself the encounter was strange, but harmless. I went to bed. And that was when the real nightmare began. I woke up to Jasper's tongue brushing my fingers. At first, I thought it was morning. He usually did that when he wanted breakfast. I rolled over, half asleep, and reached for my phone. The screen lit my room in pale blue. 3:07 a.m. I frowned. Jasper never woke me up in the middle of the night, not unless something was wrong. I sat up. The house was quiet. No wind against the windows, no creaking pipes, just stillness. Jasper was standing beside the bed, ears up, staring at the bedroom door. Then my phone buzzed again. A text from my neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, whose bedroom window faced my backyard. "Everything okay? Your dog is barking like crazy." My stomach tightened. I hadn't heard Jasper bark. Of course I hadn't. Without my hearing aids in, most sound blurred into dull vibration. But Mrs. Caldwell's message meant Jasper had already been going off for a while. I slid out of bed, clipped on my hearing aids from the nightstand, and opened my bedroom door. The sound hit me instantly. Jasper was downstairs, barking violently. Not playful barking, not warning barks at raccoons. This was frantic, aggressive, territorial, the kind of bark that said something was very wrong. I hurried down the stairs, heart thudding. Jasper stood at the glass patio door, teeth bared, body rigid, barking at something outside. I stepped closer, squinting through the darkness. The motion sensor light snapped on, and there he was, the man from the forest, standing in my backyard only a few feet from the patio door. He wore the same white camo jacket, the same dark snow pants, hood up, hands in pockets, face tilted toward the glass, toward me. For a moment, I simply froze. My brain refused to accept what I was seeing. It felt impossible. This was my home, my safe place, miles from that forest trail. Yet he stood there, calm and still, as if he had every right to be on my property at 3 a.m. Jasper slammed himself against the glass, barking so hard his nails scraped the floor. The man didn't flinch. His lips moved again. He was talking to me through the glass. I backed away slowly. My breath shook. My fingers fumbled for my phone. I opened the emergency text line and sent a message to 911 with trembling thumbs. Home invasion, unknown male in backyard, immediate danger. As soon as the message sent, I turned off the kitchen light, then the hallway light. I didn't want him to see where I was. Jasper followed me as I backed up the stairs, still barking, refusing to take his eyes off the patio door. I went into my bedroom, closed the door, and locked it. From under the bed, I pulled out the machete I kept there since moving in. It had always felt silly owning it. Tonight, it felt like the only thing between me and death. I sat on the floor beside the bed, back against the wall. Jasper sat in front of me like a shield, ears pointed toward the door. Seconds passed, then minutes. My heartbeat was so loud I could barely think. Suddenly, Jasper growled. A deep, low growl I had never heard from him before. A shadow slid under the crack of my bedroom door. Someone was in the hallway. I gripped the machete tighter, palms slick with sweat. My breathing slowed, my muscles tensed. Every instinct screamed to hide, to fight, to flee, but there was nowhere to go. The shadow shifted. A footstep creaked the floorboard outside my door. Then another. Slow, controlled, confident. The door handle twitched slightly, not violently, just enough to test if it was locked. Jasper slammed himself against the glass, barking furiously. The handle stopped moving. Silence returned. I stared at that door, waiting for it to explode inward, waiting for the lock to snap, waiting for a hand to reach under the gap. Nothing happened. Minutes crawled by. Jasper stayed rigid, growling softly. I didn't dare move. Finally, distant flashing blue light flickered through the curtains. Police! Jasper stopped growling and looked toward the window. Heavy footsteps moved through the house, male voices, shouts, then the sound of my front door opening. I stayed where I was until a voice called my name. Elise? Police, you're safe. Come out slowly. I opened the door. 2 officers stood in the hallway with flashlights. Jasper rushed past them, still barking, racing down the stairs. I followed, heart still racing. The patio door glass was shattered, broken inward, jagged edges glittering on the floor, cold air drifting into the house. The backyard gate that led directly to the forest path stood wide open, swinging slightly in the night breeze. But the man was gone. The officers searched the house, the yard, the forest edge. Nothing. No footprints. Fresh snow had started falling again, covering tracks quickly. I told them everything. The man in the forest, the footprints, the shelter, the midnight visitor. They listened, took notes, and promised to investigate. By dawn, I was sitting in a police car wrapped in a blanket, Jasper beside me, while another officer boarded up my patio door. No one was caught that night. No suspect identified, no follow-up answers. In the days that followed, I stayed with a friend across town. Jasper barely left my side. I couldn't sleep. Every shadow felt like him. Every rustle outside made my heart spike. Eventually, life moved forward. The door got replaced, the case went cold, the police stopped calling. But I never walked those forest trails again. I never left my doors unlocked. And sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I think about that man standing in my backyard, lips moving silently through the glass, talking to me. And I wonder what he was saying. The weeks after the break-in felt unreal, like I was living someone else's life. I stayed at my friend Nora's apartment across town. Jasper refused to leave my side, even following me into the bathroom and lying against the door. I barely slept. When I did, I dreamed of snow-covered trees and a tall figure standing just beyond reach, watching without blinking. The police checked in once more the following week. No updates, no suspects, no evidence beyond the shattered patio door and the open gate. They told me it was possible the man had been intoxicated or mentally unstable, or simply a burglar scared off by my dog. But they didn't know what I knew. They didn't see him in the forest before any of this happened. They didn't know he followed me home. They didn't watch his mouth move, speaking silently through the glass, as if he'd been waiting for that moment. After a month, I forced myself to return home. The new patio door gleamed too clean, too untouched. The yard looked normal again. The snow had melted into early spring mud, birds chirped, kids rode bikes down the street. Everything looked safe. But I wasn't the same person who had left. I installed extra locks, window alarms, motion lights, cameras. Every night before bed, I walked through the house checking every latch twice, sometimes 3 times. Jasper relaxed eventually, but he still stared at the backyard door more than he used to. I tried to rebuild routine, grocery trips, work, walks around the neighborhood streets. I never stepped back into the forest. Even passing its entrance made my skin crawl. Months went by. No sightings, no strange footprints, no late-night barking. Slowly, the tension in my chest eased. I started sleeping again. The machete stayed under my bed, but it gathered dust. Then, one evening in late autumn, everything came back. I was in the kitchen making tea when my phone buzzed with a notification from the backyard camera. Motion detected. My breath caught. I opened the live feed. The backyard was empty, just the gate, closed, still. I rewound the footage a few seconds. There he was, not walking, not moving, just standing at the very edge of the camera's range, near the tree line beyond the gate, hood up, white patterned jacket, hands in pockets, face pointed directly toward my house. The video lasted only 5 seconds before the motion detection ended. When the live feed returned, he was gone. I stared at the screen, pulse pounding in my ears. My hearing aids caught every tick of the kitchen clock, every hum of the fridge. Too loud, too sharp. I called the police again. This time they arrived quickly. 2 officers walked the perimeter. One checked the forest edge. The other reviewed the camera footage on my phone. "This could be anyone," he said gently. "It's too dark to identify a face." "It's the same man. He came into my house before." The officer sighed, not unkindly, but with the weariness of someone who had heard many fears and had little evidence to work with. They filed another report, promised extra patrols, suggested I consider staying elsewhere if I felt unsafe. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I took Jasper and drove to my parents' place 2 towns away. I didn't pack much, just clothes, documents, Jasper's things, and the machete. I told myself it was temporary. Weeks turned into months. I visited my house only during daylight, to collect mail, to water plants, to keep it from looking abandoned. Every time I entered, I expected to find him inside, waiting. But the house remained untouched, silent, empty. Until one winter morning. I arrived after fresh snowfall. Everything was covered in clean white. Jasper hopped out of the car first, tail wagging, nose down. Then he froze. Hackles up, low growl rumbling from his chest. I followed his gaze. Footprints. Large boot prints leading from the forest gate to the back of my house. Fresh, crisp edges in the snow. My hands went cold. I followed them around the side of the house. They stopped directly under my bedroom window, right beneath it, as if someone had stood there looking inside. No footprints leaving. They simply ended, as though whoever made them had vanished into the air. I didn't go inside. I didn't call the police this time. I stood there in the snow, staring at those tracks, and felt something settle in my bones. A certainty. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. Someone had chosen me. I moved that week. Sold the house at a loss. Didn't tell neighbors why. Packed everything. Changed my number. Changed my routine. Changed my life. I now live in a busy apartment building in a city where noise never stops, where lights never fully go out, where strangers pass in hallways daily and no one stands alone in the dark. Jasper is older now, calmer, still protective. I don't walk forests anymore. I don't leave blinds open at night, and I never ignore the feeling of being watched. Sometimes, late at night, when the city quiets just enough, I think back to that trail, the untouched snow, the silent man in white camo, the way his lips moved though I couldn't hear his words. I wonder if he ever found me again, or if he is still out there somewhere in another forest, waiting by another trail, looking for someone else who won't hear him coming. My name is Rowan. I'm 17, and I live in a small town in northern Wisconsin with my younger brother, Eli, who's 15. Our house sits on the edge of town, where the paved streets fade into gravel roads and thick pine forest. Most people here either work in logging, park services, or the paper mill. My mom manages a local grocery store. My dad works deep in the forest for a private land clearing company. He's gone most days from sunrise until late evening, sometimes without signal for hours. Life in our town is quiet. Safe, I used to think. This happened in early December. The first real snow of the season had fallen overnight, soft and clean, covering everything in white. Eli and I had the day off school. Mom was working an early shift. Dad had already left before we woke up. We decided to go to the movies in the next town over. It was a 40-minute drive, but we'd done it plenty of times. There was a new horror movie out that everyone online was talking about. Technically, we were underage for it, but in small towns, nobody cares much if you look old enough. We bundled up, brushed snow off the car, and headed out. The drive was easy, just long stretches of road cutting through forest, radio playing low, Eli scrolling on his phone in the passenger seat. The theater was almost empty, just a handful of people scattered in the seats. We bought tickets, snacks, and slipped into the dark room. The movie was loud and bloody and ridiculous. We laughed at some parts, jumped at others. About halfway through, during a quiet moment in the film, my phone buzzed loudly. The sound echoed in the silent theater. People turned toward me with annoyed faces. Eli hissed at me to silence it. Embarrassed, I stood up quickly to leave the row so I could check it outside. My boot caught on someone's bag and I stumbled forward. More laughter, more annoyed whispers. My face burned as Eli followed me out. In the hallway, I checked the screen. Dad was calling. I frowned. He never called during work unless something was wrong. I answered, but the call ended instantly. No voice, no sound, just a dead connection. Before I could call back, a text came through. "Hey, can you bring me some lunch? The small food cabin by the lake is closed today. I'm working near the water. Would really appreciate it." I stared at the message. Dad often bought lunch from a little cabin cafe near the forest lake. It wasn't strange that it was closed in winter. It wasn't strange that he'd ask for food, but it was strange that he texted instead of calling again after the failed call. I showed Eli. He shrugged. Maybe no signal. Text went through. That made sense. We didn't question it. We left the theater, drove home, and packed a bag with sandwiches, chips, and a thermos of coffee. By the time we started driving toward the forest access road, the sky had turned pale gray. Early winter evenings come fast here. The forest road was narrow, lined with towering pines dusted in snow. It was beautiful in a lonely way. I'd grown up hiking these trails with Dad. I'd never once felt unsafe. We parked near the main entrance to the trails. Dad had told us in the past where he worked when he was near the lake. There was a maintenance deck down by the water used by workers and rangers. It wasn't far, a short walk downhill. We grabbed the food bag and started down the packed snow path. The air was still. No wind, no birds, just the soft crunch of our boots. Halfway down, I tried calling Dad again. No answer. I texted him. "We're here, walking down to the lake." A moment later, the 3 dots appeared. "Go down the hill and wait by the deck. I'll be there." We followed the path as the light dimmed further. The lake came into view, a stretch of dark water bordered by frozen edges. And there, sitting on the wooden deck, was a man in a black winter jacket with his back to us. Eli nudged me. "That's Dad." I wasn't so sure. Something about his posture felt wrong. Dad always sat with his shoulders relaxed, one leg bouncing. This man sat completely still. We walked closer. "Dad?" I called. The man didn't move. Eli slowed. "Rowan?" I stepped forward anyway. "Dad, we brought your—" Still nothing. A chill crawled up my back. I moved closer, lifting my hand toward his hood. Eli grabbed my arm. "Rowan, don't." I pulled the hood back. The man turned. He wasn't my father. His eyes were wide and bright, too bright. His mouth stretched into a grin that didn't reach his eyes. In his gloved hand, he dangled my dad's phone, swinging it slowly like a toy. My stomach dropped. Eli gasped and stumbled backward. I forced words out. "Where did you get that?" The man didn't speak. He only smiled wider. Then, without warning, he lunged. He grabbed Eli's arm, fingers digging into his sleeve. Eli screamed. I yanked him backward with all my strength. The food bag fell, sandwiches scattering across the deck. We ran. The path uphill felt endless. My lungs burned. Snow sprayed behind our boots. Behind us, heavy footsteps pounded against the wood, deck, then packed snow. He was chasing us. I didn't look back. I just ran, faster than I ever thought I could. Eli stayed beside me, breath ragged, panic sharp in his eyes. The car came into view like a miracle. We sprinted to it. I unlocked it with shaking hands, shoved Eli inside, slammed the doors, locked them, and threw the car into reverse. The man burst from the trees just as I spun the wheel. He reached my window, his gloved hand slapping the glass once, twice. I didn't stay to see more. I hit the gas and shot down the gravel road, tire skidding on snow before catching grip. The forest blurred past. Neither of us spoke. We just breathed, shaking, alive. When we finally reached town and pulled into our driveway, our parents were already home. Dad's truck sat in the driveway. He stepped outside as we ran to the door, confusion on his face. That was when we realized something that made the fear even worse. Dad had never sent us that message at all. And somehow, someone out in the forest had his phone. Dad didn't speak at first. He just stared at us, then at the empty food bag still hanging from my shaking hand. Mom pulled us inside immediately. Eli broke down first, words tumbling over each other as he tried to explain. I filled in what he couldn't. The man, the lake, the phone, the chase. Dad's face drained of color when I mentioned his phone. He pulled his own phone from his pocket. It wasn't there. I lost it, he said slowly. This morning. I thought I left it in the truck. When I couldn't find it, I assumed it fell somewhere at the site. Mom asked the question none of us wanted to consider. Could someone have taken it? Dad nodded, jaw tightening. There are occasional trespassers, people who try to sneak onto restricted land, but I've never had issues like this. The police arrived within 20 minutes. 2 officers took our statements at the kitchen table while another walked the perimeter of the house with Dad. Eli sat beside me, knees bouncing uncontrollably. Mom kept one arm around each of us. I explained everything again. The texts, the man at the lake, his smile, the way he chased us. The officer writing it all down frowned when I mentioned the phone messages. So the person used your father's phone to lure you to the lake? Yes. And your father never sent those texts? Dad confirmed it. The officers exchanged looks. One of them asked for Dad's phone number and IMEI details. They said they could try tracking it if it was still powered on. Before they left, one officer turned to us. You did the right thing by running. Don't go back out there, not even in daylight. We'll send a unit to search the lake area. That night, none of us slept much. Eli stayed in my room. Dad double-checked every lock. Mom kept the porch lights on full brightness. Around 11 p.m., Dad got a call from the police. They had found his phone. It was still sitting on the wooden deck by the lake, just lying there, screen cracked, no sign of the man, no footprints left to follow. Fresh snowfall had covered everything. They returned the phone the next morning. No fingerprints, no useful evidence, no suspect. By all logic, that should have been the end. But fear doesn't work on logic. For the next week, Eli and I refused to leave the house alone. Dad drove us to school and picked us up. Mom made sure one of them was always home. The forest that once felt like part of our backyard now felt like a living thing waiting just beyond the tree line. Days passed. Nothing happened. Gradually, life started to feel normal again, or at least something close to it. Then came the second night. It was a Friday. Snow fell lightly outside. The house was quiet. Dad and Mom were already asleep. Eli had fallen asleep in his room with music playing softly. I was still awake, lying in bed with the TV on low volume, scrolling on my phone. The clock read 12:58 a.m. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. My stomach tightened before I even opened the message. I like that your room is the only one with light. I froze. My eyes moved slowly from my phone to the TV screen. It glowed faintly across my room, the only light source upstairs. A second message appeared. You look older in person. My fingers went numb. I turned the TV off. Silence swallowed the room. Then I heard it. A faint rustling sound outside my window. My room was on the second floor. There was no balcony, no tree close enough to touch the glass, and yet something was there. I slid out of bed as quietly as I could and crept to the window. My hand trembled as I lifted the blind just enough to see outside. A man stood in the yard below. He looked up at my window. Even in the dim porch light, I recognized that grin. In his hand was something dark and metallic. A gun. I stumbled backward with a gasp. My foot hit the edge of my desk. The noise must have given me away. The man raised the gun. I screamed. Glass exploded inward as a shot shattered my window. Shards sprayed across my floor in bed. I threw myself to the ground, covering my head. Dad burst into the room seconds later, Mom and Eli close behind. "Gun!" I shouted. "Outside! He has a gun!" Dad didn't question me. He grabbed Eli and Mom and dragged us into the hallway, pushing us into the bathroom at the end of the corridor. It had no windows. He locked the door and handed Mom his phone. "Call 911. Stay here." Then he ran downstairs. Another crash echoed through the house, this time from the kitchen. Mom was shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. Eli clung to my arm. I sat on the cold tile floor, heart hammering so hard it made me dizzy. We listened. Footsteps downstairs, glass crunching, a door slamming, then silence. Police sirens arrived minutes later. Red and blue lights flashed through the frosted bathroom window. Officers shouted outside. Doors opened. Heavy boots moved through the house. Eventually, an officer knocked gently on the bathroom door and told us it was safe to come out. The house looked like a storm had passed through it. My bedroom window was destroyed. Glass covered the floor. Downstairs, the kitchen window was also shattered. Cold air poured in. But the man was gone. No one found him. No one saw a vehicle leaving. No neighbors saw anything suspicious. Just 2 broken windows and a family shaking in the middle of the night. One of the officers walked around the car parked in the driveway. After a moment, he called Dad over. They stood near my rear tire, flashlights shining low. Dad waved us outside. Attached to the inner edge of my rear car bumper was a small round device, an AirTag. The officer pulled it off with gloved fingers. "That's how he found your house," he said quietly. My mind flashed back to the lake, the chase, the way the man had crouched near my car before I sped away. He hadn't just tried to stop us. He had tagged us. The police took the AirTag and the phone as evidence. They promised patrol cars would circle our neighborhood more often. They said they would do everything they could to find him. But days turned into weeks. No arrest, no suspect, no explanation. Eventually, the news crews stopped calling. The police stopped updating. The case faded into a folder somewhere in a station we never visited. We replaced the windows. Dad installed motion lights, then cameras, then a security system. Eli started sleeping with a baseball bat beside his bed. I kept my curtains closed even during the day. Spring came. The snow melted. The forest turned green again. But none of us ever walked those trails anymore. And even now, when my phone lights up in the dark, a part of me still fears seeing an unknown number with a message that proves he never really left. Because we never learned who he was, or what he truly wanted from us. The police stayed visible for about a week. A patrol car cruised past our house every couple of hours. Officers knocked once a day to check if we were all right. Neighbors left porch lights on in quiet solidarity. Some asked gentle questions. Others avoided eye contact, as if fear was contagious. But routine always returns. By the second week, the patrols came less often. By the third week, they stopped entirely. Dad went back to work. Mom returned to her normal shifts. Eli went back to school without insisting on being picked up. And I pretended I was okay. Pretended I didn't still feel watched every time I stepped near a window. Life patched itself back together on the surface, but underneath, something had changed in all of us. Dad grew quieter. He triple-checked locks every night. Sometimes I'd find him staring out the kitchen window long after dark, as if expecting a silhouette to appear at any moment. Mom kept our curtains closed at all hours. The house always felt dim now. Safe, but dim. Eli stopped listening to music in his room. He said he wanted to hear everything, every creak, every footstep, every whisper of wind against the siding. And me? I stopped trusting my instincts, because every time I thought back to that first day at the lake, one thought haunted me more than the gun, more than the shattered glass. He knew exactly how to get us there. He didn't force us, didn't drag us, didn't chase us at first. He studied us. He learned who our father was. He learned our habits. He waited until we were alone. He used a stolen phone and a simple message to lead us into the woods like we were characters in a story he had already written. That realization made the world feel different, sharper, colder, less random. A few months passed. Winter thawed into spring, snow melted, the lake returned to blue instead of white. The forest grew leaves again, covering every path that once held footprints. One Saturday afternoon, Dad came home with a small cardboard box. He set it on the table and opened it. Inside were 2 new phones, new numbers, new accounts. "We're starting fresh," he said. "No old devices, no old tracking, no loose ends." It should have made me feel safer, but it didn't erase the memory of how easily our lives had been entered, how silently, how quickly. That night, I lay awake, staring at my ceiling, listening to Eli's soft breathing in the next room and the hum of the new security system downstairs. Safe. That was the word everyone used. But safety didn't feel like a lock on a door anymore, or a camera in the corner, or a patrol car driving past. Safety felt fragile, temporary, conditional, like something that could be taken again if someone wanted it badly enough. A year has passed now. We moved. Not far, but far enough that the forest is no longer part of our backyard. The new house sits in a neighborhood with close-set homes and busy streets. No lake, no isolated trails, no silent tree line. Eli is taller now, louder, more confident. He jokes again, laughs freely. The night doesn't scare her anymore. Mom has started opening the curtains again, letting sunlight back into the house, cooking with music playing, filling rooms with normal sounds. Dad still checks locks twice. That habit never left. And me? I'm older, not just in years, in awareness. I don't walk with both earbuds in anymore. I don't ignore unknown numbers. I don't assume that people mean well just because they smile. Some might call that paranoia. I call it surviving. Because no matter how much time passes, sometimes in the quiet moments before sleep, I remember his grin by the lake, the way he waved my father's phone like a trophy, the way he stood outside my window with a gun as if he had every right to be there. And I wonder, was he acting alone? Was he just a random predator who got lucky? Or had he been watching longer than we ever realized? The police never found him. No arrests, no suspects, no name, no face in any database. Just a missing person connected to the stolen phone. A file that went cold. A story that ended on paper but never really ended in my mind. People ask why we moved. We tell them we wanted a change, a new start, a better neighborhood. We don't tell them that sometimes when my phone buzzes unexpectedly, my heart still drops into my stomach. We don't tell them that I still keep a small baseball bat beside my bed. We don't tell them that once you've been hunted, for even a single night, you never quite feel the possibility of it happening again. I've replayed every moment. The movie theater, the text message, the hill, the lake, the run, the shattered glass, the AirTag. I used to blame myself for walking down that hill. Now I know something important. Predators don't need your mistakes. They just need your existence. I share this story for one reason only. If your phone ever leads you somewhere that feels wrong, trust that feeling. If a message feels off, question it. If someone seems to know too much about you, take it seriously. Because sometimes danger doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it sends a text, and sometimes it's already waiting where you've been told to go. My name isn't really Ember, and this story changed me, but I'm still here, and that's the ending he didn't get to write. If I had to describe that day in one word, it would be chaos. It was February 2021, the heart of lockdown season, the kind of winter where the sky stayed the color of dirty cotton and the wind never stopped screaming. I had been working from my tiny apartment in Brookvale, glued to video meetings for hours, watching my own exhausted face reflected back at me in a webcam. My name is Nolan Pierce. At least that's what I'll call myself here. That night, I was supposed to meet my family at my mother's house in Ridgewood, a small town tucked against miles of untouched forest. We were gathering for a delayed holiday dinner. Nothing big, just my parents, my aunt and uncle, a few cousins, something normal in a year that had been anything but. The problem was work. A meeting that should have ended at 6 dragged on until nearly 8. By the time I finally shut my laptop, my phone was already buzzing with messages asking where I was. I threw on a coat, poured 2 travel mugs of coffee, and stepped outside. The storm had worsened. Snow came down sideways. The parking lot was buried. My aging silver sedan sat under a white blanket like a forgotten toy. I brushed off what I could, started the engine, and pulled out onto the street. Driving through Brookvale felt like moving through a snow globe. Visibility was poor, the plows hadn't kept up, and my car was not built for conditions like this. No traction control, no anti-lock brakes, just me, a worn steering wheel, and bad decisions waiting to happen. Still, once I reached the highway, I let habit take over. I sped up, too fast, faster than I should have. I told myself I was an experienced driver. I told myself I'd be fine. It took nearly 2 hours to reach Ridgewood. By the time I pulled into my mother's driveway, it was already past 9. Warm light spilled from the windows. Inside, laughter and clinking glasses. I stomped snow off my boots and stepped into a house filled with voices I hadn't heard in too long. Dinner had started without me, but they saved a plate. There were drinks, there were stories, there was comfort. I felt the day's stress slowly melt away. And I forgot something important. I still had to drive home. Time slipped. Midnight passed unnoticed. One cousin left, then another. Eventually, my aunt hugged me goodbye, my uncle waved, and the house began to quiet. That's when I realized how late it had gotten. Outside, the storm had doubled in strength. Fresh snow piled over the earlier layers. The wind howled through the trees surrounding the neighborhood. The roads would be worse now. Much worse. I told myself I was fine to drive. I'd only had a couple drinks over several hours. I was tired more than anything. I just wanted my own bed. I hugged my parents goodbye, promised to text when I got home, and stepped back into the storm. The drive back started slow, cautious. The neighborhood streets were nearly invisible under thick snow. No other cars, no footprints, just darkness and swirling white. Once I reached a longer, straighter stretch of road, I made another mistake. I sped up. Not wildly, but enough to feel like I was making progress, enough to forget that the road beneath me was nothing but ice hidden under powder. A bend in the road approached, and suddenly the rear of my car slid sideways. I'd skidded before, I knew the theory. Turn into it, ease off, don't slam the brakes, but fear is louder than knowledge. The curve rushed at me, my tires failed to grip, the world tilted, snow, trees, sky, all spinning in one blurred moment. Then, impact. The front of my car slammed into something solid. The airbag exploded into my face, a violent white flash. My body jerked forward and snapped back. My ears rang. The engine choked and died. Silence followed, heavy and complete. For a moment, I just sat there, breathing hard, heart hammering against my ribs. My hands shook, but nothing hurt. No broken bones, no blood, just shock. I unbuckled and pushed open the door. The front of my car was buried in a snowbank pressed against a thick pine tree. The hood crumpled. Steam hissed faintly into the freezing air. There was no way I was driving this anywhere. I pulled out my phone. Weak signal, but enough to call roadside assistance. A recorded voice told me a tow truck would be dispatched, though due to the storm, it could take 40 minutes or longer. 40 minutes alone on a deserted forest road in a blizzard. So I called my father. He answered on the second ring, groggy but alert once I explained. He said he'd get dressed and drive over. He told me to stay inside the car, keep the heater running if I could, lock the doors. When the call ended, I followed his advice. I sat in the driver's seat, engine off, heater dying. The world outside, nothing but wind and white noise. Snow topped gently against the windows. Darkness swallowed everything beyond a few feet. I checked the clock on my phone. 12:47 a.m. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. That's when I heard it. Not the wind, not the creaking of trees. Something else. A crunching sound. Rhythmic, measured. Footsteps in the snow. My eyes snapped open. I listened. The sound stopped. I waited. 10 seconds, 20? Nothing. Maybe it was just branches falling or drifting snow shifting. Then I heard it again. Closer this time. I swallowed. My throat felt dry. I turned on my phone flashlight and pressed it against the fogged window. Light scattered through frost and snow, revealing nothing beyond. The footsteps faded again. Silence returned. But now I was fully awake. Every muscle tense, every breath careful. Then a new sound drifted through the storm. Wet, thick, unnatural, like something being torn apart. Somewhere outside my car, beyond sight, something made a slow, slurping noise in the dark. And I knew with absolute certainty I was no longer alone on that road.
I told myself I was imagining things. The storm was loud, snow shifted, ice cracked. Forests make strange noises at night. That's what I repeated in my head as I tightened my grip on the steering wheel.
Still, I couldn't ignore what I'd heard. Footsteps, close, heavy, purposeful, and that wet, tearing sound that didn't belong in any normal winter night. I reached for my phone and checked the time again. 12:53 a.m. My dad wouldn't arrive for at least 20 minutes, the tow truck even longer. I was alone on a forest road in a blizzard with a dead car and something outside that had definitely been moving. I decided to look. Slowly, I lifted myself from the seat and leaned toward the driver's side window. I wiped a small circle in the fogged glass with my sleeve and pressed my face close. Nothing. Just swirling snow and darkness. I exhaled, almost laughing at myself. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe the stress of the day and the crash had made me paranoid. That's when something hit the passenger side window. A sharp tap, like a small stone thrown from outside. I froze. Another tap. Then silence again. My pulse roared in my ears. I stared at the passenger side window, but it was completely covered in snow. I couldn't see through it at all. I didn't know what possessed me to do it, but I opened the driver's side door and stepped out into the storm. Cold air slapped me instantly. Snow blew into my eyes. My shoes sunk deep into powder. I raised my flashlight fan and swept it around. The beam caught something immediately. Footprints. Large boot prints in the snow, circling my car. Fresh, crisp edges, not filled in by snowfall yet. They hadn't been there when I first stepped out earlier. My stomach tightened. I followed the trail of prints with the flashlight. They led away from the passenger side door and toward the tree line. I should have gotten back into the car right then, locked the doors, waited, but curiosity and fear mixed into something dangerous. I opened the glove compartment and took out the only thing that made me feel slightly less helpless, a compact handgun I kept legally stored. My father had insisted I carry it after I moved out on my own. I held it with shaking hands, trying to remember every safety rule he drilled into me. Then I followed the footprints. The wind swallowed sound. The further I walked, the quieter everything became. My car's dim silhouette faded behind me, swallowed by snow and darkness. As I moved closer to the trees, I noticed something else. Drops in the snow. Dark. Too dark to be mud. Blood. My heart hammered harder as I followed the trail. The flashlight beam trembled in my grip. The footprints and blood led past the first row of trees, deeper into the forest. And then I saw it. A shape lying in the snow.
Large. Still. Wrong. I stopped walking. My breath fogged in front of me. I raised the flashlight higher and let the beam settle. It was a deer, or what was left of one. Its body lay twisted in the snow, stomach torn open, ribs exposed, blood spread in a frozen halo beneath it. But that wasn't the worst part. Its head was gone. Not torn off by an animal. Cut, clean, precise. I stumbled backward, fighting the urge to gag. The flashlight beam darted around the surrounding trees, expecting to see eyes reflecting back at me. Nothing. No movement. No sound. Only the storm. Every instinct screamed at me to run, so I did. I turned and rushed back through the snow, nearly slipping as I followed my own footprints back toward the car. The wind felt stronger now, louder, as if the forest itself was watching. When I finally reached the car, I grabbed the door handle and pulled it open, and froze. On the driver's seat, resting perfectly where I had been sitting minutes earlier, was the severed head of the deer. Its empty eyes stared upward, snow melting slowly over its fur, blood soaking into the fabric of my seat. For a second, my mind refused to process this. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. Then terror hit full force. I slammed the door shut so hard the glass rattled. I backed away from the car. My breath came fast and shallow. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped my phone and the gun. Someone did this. Someone had walked past me in the storm. Someone had followed me. Someone was close enough to place that head inside my car without me hearing anything. I didn't wait to think further. I ran. I bolted down the road, away from the car, away from the forest, away from whatever nightmare had just stepped into my life. Snow sprayed up with every step. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. I didn't know where I was running to. Just away. After a few minutes that felt like hours, I saw headlights cutting through the storm in the distance. I waved my arms wildly, shouting. The vehicle slowed, tires crunching through snow, and pulled over beside me. It was my dad's truck. I nearly collapsed into the passenger seat. He stared at me, confused, asking what happened, why I was running in the middle of a blizzard with a gun in my hand. I tried to explain. Words came tangled and frantic. The crash, the footsteps, the footprints, the deer, the head in the car. He listened, but I could see doubt in his eyes. Concern, yes, but disbelief, too. He told me to calm down, that maybe I'd mistaken something in the dark, that accidents and storms could play tricks on a tired mind. I knew what I'd seen, but I didn't have the energy to argue. After a few minutes, I convinced him to drive us back to the car. The road back felt longer. The storm had worsened. Snow buried the path I'd run. When we finally reached the crash site, my heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. We stepped out. The footprints were still there, circling the car, leading into the woods. My father's expression changed slightly when he saw them. We approached the car together. I opened the driver's side door slowly. The seat was empty. No deer head, only a dark stain of blood soaking into the fabric. My father stared at it in silence, then at the footprints, then at me. He didn't say I was lying after that. We searched the area with his flashlight. The trail into the woods was still visible, drag marks in the snow where something heavy had been pulled away, but the deer's body was gone. The forest had swallowed it again. Not long after, the tow truck finally arrived. The driver didn't ask questions, just hooked up the car and pulled it free from the tree. By the time we left that road, I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if anyone was watching from the trees. We drove home in silence. No police report was filed that night. I was exhausted, shaking, mentally drained. My father said we'd talk in the morning, that there was nothing the police could really do without clear evidence. But sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the deer's empty gaze, the blood, the footprints circling my car, the knowledge that someone was close enough to touch my door, my seat, my space, without making a sound. I kept wondering the same question again and again. Who was out there in that forest? And why had they chosen me?
I didn't sleep that night. Even after I was safely in my childhood bedroom with the door locked and the heater humming, my body refused to relax. Every time the wind rattled the window, I flinched. Every creak in the house made my heart jump. My father stayed up for a while, pacing the hallway, checking the locks more than once. He didn't say much, neither did I. There was nothing left to explain. Morning came slowly. Gray light filtered through heavy clouds. The storm had passed, but fresh snow covered everything outside, smooth and untouched, like the night before had never happened. Except it had. My phone buzzed with a message from roadside assistance, confirming my car had been delivered to a repair yard. My father offered to drive me there later to collect my belongings from inside it. I didn't want to see the car again. Not the seat, not the stain, but I needed my things, so I agreed. By late morning, we drove to the repair yard on the edge of town. The owner, a heavy-set man with tired eyes, led us through rows of wrecked vehicles dusted in snow. My car sat near the fence, hood crushed, windshield cracked like a spider web. I opened the driver's side door. The smell hit me first, a metallic tang beneath cold air. Blood, still there. The seat had been partially cleaned by the tow driver, but the stain remained, dark, dried, permanent. I stared at it longer than I should have. My father placed a hand on my shoulder and gently guided me away. I gathered my belongings quickly, my bag, my jacket, my coffee thermos still rolling on the passenger floor from the crash, ordinary things from a night that now felt unreal. On the way home, my father finally spoke. He said we could call the police if I wanted, file a report, show them the location, explain the footprints, the blood, the deer. I thought about it. What would I say? That someone placed a deer's severed head in my car and vanished into the forest? That I heard sounds in a storm and found a mutilated animal? That footprints appeared around my car on a deserted road? It sounded insane even to me, and yet it was real. But exhaustion won. I told him not to bother, that I just wanted to forget it. He didn't argue. Life moved on. Days passed, work calls resumed, snow melted slowly from the roads. The crash became a story people joked about. Remember when your car died in that storm, they'd say? I smiled and nodded. I never told them what really happened after the crash. Weeks later, I started driving again, borrowed my mother's car, took safer roads, never sped, never drove in storms, never drove alone at night if I could avoid it. But something inside me had shifted. I noticed things more. Shadows at the edge of tree lines, isolated roads, forest paths just off highways. I realized how easy it was to disappear out there, how the world could swallow something and never give answers. One evening, nearly 2 months after the incident, I was out home watching television when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. No name, no previous messages. Just one text. Still driving alone? My fingers turned cold instantly. I read it again and again. There was no context, no greeting, no signature, just that. I didn't reply. I blocked the number immediately, then checked every lock in the house. Windows, doors, garage. I even looked outside, scanning the yard, the street, the dark stretch of trees beyond the backyard. Nothing. No footprints, no movement, no figures. That night, I barely slept again. The next morning, I told myself it was probably spam, a wrong number, a coincidence, but the timing was too perfect, too cruel. I changed my number after that. Spring came. Snow melted slowly from the roads. The crash became a story people joked about. Remember when your car died in that storm, they'd say? I smiled and nodded. I never told them what really happened after the crash. On a warm afternoon in May, I drove past that road with a friend. Just once. Curiosity pulled me there like an old wound that needed to be poked. The bend in the road looked harmless now. No storm, no snowbanks, no shadows. Just a curve lined with tall trees. If I hadn't lived it, I would never believe anything strange had happened there. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I just kept driving. I never returned. To this day, I don't know who was in that forest. I don't know if they followed me from the crash or if they were already there, watching cars pass on lonely roads, waiting for someone unlucky enough to break down. I don't know if the deer was a warning, a threat, or just proof that something out there enjoyed fear. All I know is this: someone was close enough to my car to place something inside it without me noticing. Someone was out there in the storm. Someone who vanished without a trace. And sometimes, late at night when the wind howls outside and trees scrape against the window, I think back to those footprints circling my car. Not leading away. Circling. Like whoever made them wasn't just passing through. They were deciding what to do with me.